Good morning and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tara McNally, and as many of you know, I am the Assistant Director of Evaluation for the Center for Religion and Civic Culture at the University of Southern California. We are the Measurement, Evaluation, and Learning Partner for the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation's Catholic Sisters Initiative. At last year's convenings, we gave you an overview of the Phase 2 strategy, along with the 18 key indicators of progress. Today, we will be using our time to dive into deeper detail on how to collect data to measure progress against the key indicators of progress. First, we will start with a quick overview of the initiative's strategic targets. We will then offer some general recommendations on how to align your monitoring and evaluation plans with the objectives outlined in the Phase 2 strategy. After this, we will go through each of the key indicators of progress. Finally, we will end the webinar with a live questions period. All of this is recorded and will be available to you on the Grantee portal. I will send you a link with the material after the webinar is done, and it is up on the portal. I know some of you have seen these strategy targets a few times, but I want to go quickly over them so the key indicators of progress make some sense. The Sisters Education Portfolio focuses on strengthening and sustaining the internal systems that support the leadership of sisters and their organizations, and reflects the inward focus part of the strategy's theory of change. The primary objective of the portfolio is to increase the financial and human resources capacities needed to sustain congregations of sisters, their services, and the organizations that they are serving. These are the targets under this portfolio. The Human Development Services portfolio was established to reflect the extensive reach of Catholic sisters around the globe and their contribution to the communities they serve through their ministries and their spiritual witness. The Catholic Sisters Initiative's central focus in this portfolio is to increase the capacity of congregations and their ministries to serve youth and young adults, age 15 to 25, as well as their families. The targets for this portfolio are on this slide and the next slide, and I'll give you a second to read through this. The Knowledge Generation and Management portfolio was developed out of a need for more information and empirical data on Catholic sisters and their ministries. The primary objective for this portfolio is to research, gather, apply, and disseminate information to improve practices of congregations and leadership conferences, expand and improve the quality of human development services, and increase collaborative partnerships. The Catholic Sisters Initiative developed the Innovation and Sustainability portfolio to identify and foster creative approaches to the financial vitality of congregations and their ministries. The objective of this portfolio is to create sustainable solutions to the challenges to the vitality of Catholic sisters organizations and their ministries. The cross-cutting themes for the four portfolios are collaboration and networking and communications. You will notice that there are no specific numeric targets set for these activities. We will talk a little bit about measuring change in baselines in a moment. We're getting to the general recommendations section. There are going to be some of you in this audience that might need to adjust the way you collect and analyze your data in your existing grant, which was made before the implementation of the Phase 2 strategy. There are some of you that might be writing grants under the Phase 2 strategy, and you need to keep in mind these general recommendations and the indicators we will be discussing in detail. As you all know, in this new phase, A greater emphasis has been placed on measuring outputs, developing outcomes, and standardizing processes across the Foundation's various funding areas. This requires that grantees adjust their evaluation plans in order to collect the data necessary to quantify their progress. You may have noticed that data is measured in the following 3 units of analysis, depending on the indicators most relevant to your work. Let me reiterate that again. Depending on the indicators most relevant to your work, not all of the indicators. Catholic sisters and women religious. Several indicators measure outputs on the level of an individual sister. It is important to quantify the number of sisters involved in any funded project. At the congregation level, several indicators measure outputs and outcomes on the congregational level. It is important to collect data related to individuals' connections to institutions such as a congregation, especially if programs, trainings, degrees, etc. have an implementation element. Youth and young adults. The Phase 2 strategy identifies the target beneficiaries for funded work related to human development services as youth and young adults, ages 15 to 25. If a funded project is serving beneficiaries, data collected on that population should be collected in such a way as to quantify the youth and young adults being served. If you are providing training to sisters, you should be quantifying the number of classroom hours that is required to complete each training program. If you are working in a human development services area, the type of work you are doing should be codified using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. An example of codifying your work using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is, if you're providing food to a hungry population in your work, it should be coded to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is zero hunger. Some other general recommendations. For communications metrics, it is important to document any peer-reviewed publications using some form of citation. We don't care what the citation format is in, just make sure that you have the author, the publication, the date, and if there is a web link. It is important to also capture your social media metrics, and I'll get a little bit more specific on that later on in the presentation. For networking activities, you should be documenting presentations, conference attendance, and partnerships. So I'm going to move on for a second to important definitions. There are some important definitions that you need to be aware of as you capture data for your project. First, what do we mean when we ask you for data on unique sisters? When asked to provide a count of unique sisters, please provide the number of distinct individuals without duplication, even if the individual may have participated in numerous programs. Unique congregations. In addition to collecting in these units, you will also need to be able to provide the total number of distinct congregations without duplication, so we know the total number of congregations who have participated. Baseline, and I know a lot of you have had questions about this. If your grant is doing any work related to improving a congregation or a program, you will need to be able to measure improvement over time. This often requires something known as a baseline, which is a starting point used for comparison. You should be thinking of how to measure baseline as a part of your monitoring and evaluation plans. For example, let's say you want to be able to improve the number of beneficiaries served in one of your ministries. To measure that improvement, you will need to determine how many people are currently being served, and then this is your baseline for measuring change moving forward. Any difference after your intervention will be your change. And then you'll be able to determine if this is an improvement or not, and you can adjust accordingly. Notable non-strategy outputs and outcomes. There will be things that you're doing that are not measured in these beautiful key indicators of progress. That does not mean it is not important. Let me say that again. That does not mean that it is not important. You should be keeping track of any notable non-strategy outputs and outcomes. There will be space for you to report that. So for example, you provide training to sisters and those sisters use that training to change government policy through advocacy. Another example is reporting back your beneficiary numbers when those beneficiaries fall outside the focused age range in the strategy that I mentioned previously. So now we get into the nitty-gritty, which are the key indicators of progress. The Foundation is currently working on its giving data system, the same system you submitted your application through over the last couple of years. And soon your reporting will go through that same system. We're going to use this opportunity to think through how to report on the 18 key indicators of progress. We are going to use this opportunity to think through how to report on those 18 key indicators of progress in anticipation of future reporting requirements. For each indicator, we will discuss a definition and some data notes. Sisters Education Portfolio. So the first indicator under the Sisters Education Portfolio is the number of congregations benefiting from their members' post-secondary training, and the target is 500 congregations. So the definition for this indicator is the total number of congregations benefiting from their members' post-secondary education or training. To benefit a congregation, a sister must return to their congregation after receiving a post-secondary degree and/or training and implement a change that improves organizational processes. Types of improvement include higher morale, increased productivity and quality of work, staff retention, growing volunteer base, improved volunteer management or recruitment, improved programmatic results, money earned or raised, and increased earnings. So some data notes on this. You should collect and report data on the type of benefit, the description of benefit, the number of congregations, number of sisters with completed degrees, and the number of sisters with completed training. Types of benefits can include improved financial systems, fundraising, human resources, enhanced programs, enhanced communications, better data collection, along with higher morale, increased productivity and quality of work, employee retention, improved programmatic results, money earned, raised, and increased earnings. The next indicator under this portfolio is the number of sisters who complete capacity building training in finance, management, or ministry-related technical area. The target is 2,000 sisters undertaking leadership training. For the definition for this indicator, a training focused on helping sisters undertake a human development service can be reported to this indicator as a ministry-related technical area. Ministry-related technical training can be internally focused on building congregational capacity and externally focused on programming. Training does not include conference attendance, formation activities, or interculturality training or activities. Some data notes for this. For this indicator, you need to be collecting the following: the name of the training program, the type of training, the number of hours to complete that training program, and the number of sisters completing the program. And related to this, the number of unique congregations. The next indicator under the Sisters Education Portfolio is the number of sisters completing post-secondary education degrees, and the target is 800 sisters having completed their degrees. The definition is the total number of sisters completing post-secondary education degrees. A post-secondary education degree is any degree that follows a high school diploma, and this might include associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, or doctoral degrees. A few data notes for capturing and reporting on this. You need to be recording the type of degree earned, the specialization, so for example, a Master of Public Health, the number of sisters graduated with completed degrees, the number of sisters in process of completing degrees, so we can get an idea of who's in the pipeline, the number of unique congregations in relation to sisters graduated. The next indicator for this portfolio is the number of sisters completing formation or formators training and continuing formation and sabbatical programs. The target is 400 sisters completing formation or formators training. So this broad measure captures a range of lifetime formation activities that aim to nurture sisters' identification with their congregational charism and improve their retention rates. Formation does not include lay formation and/or accompaniment. Formation is defined as being sister-focused. Let me repeat that again. It's sister-focused. You may also report on intergenerational activities using this indicator. You may report on any interculturality training or activities using this indicator. So there's quite a few data notes for this one. Concretely, you should measure, if applicable, let me reiterate that again, if applicable to your program, the number of postulants, novices in the process of completing early formation, the number of sisters completed formators training, the number of sisters trained by newly formed formators, the number of sisters engaged in ongoing formation, the number of sisters engaged in sabbatical programs, the number of sisters engaged in intergenerational training, the number of sisters engaged in interculturality training, and the number of training hours to complete your particular program. So this final indicator under the sisters education portfolio is the number of congregations in the improvement process that have strengthened a subset of organizational systems. The target is 100 congregations in the improvement process that have strengthened a subset of organizational elements. The definition for this indicator is the total number of congregations progressing towards strengthened internal systems based on initial capacity assessment or the implementation of a novel change. Internal systems include financial management, fundraising, human resources, data collection, analysis, and reporting, measurement, and evaluation. A little bit more on the definition. Here are some important additional notes. This indicator requires either baseline assessment to measure improvement or increased strength of internal systems, or the implementation of something that did not exist prior to the intervention. To qualify for this indicator, you must either implement a new program or improvement on the congregational level, or track improvements through baseline, as we talked about before. Only report on this indicator if you have received a grant specifically focused on congregational improvement, or a change has been implemented by a sister that did not exist before the intervention. Some data notes. You should be collecting and reporting the number of congregations with improvements, the type of improvement, if baseline was captured or not, how was that baseline captured? If the institutional capacity assessment tool, the ICAT, was implemented, and how frequently. The types of improvement may include financial, human resources, fundraising, data collection, program creation, improved staffing, and improved data sharing. So we have finally moved on to the Human Development Services portfolio. The first indicator that we will be looking at is at the number of youth and young adults reached through Human Development Services run by sisters. The target is 300,000 youth and young adults reached. This indicator is defined as the total number of youth and young adults reached through Human Development Services run by sisters. Grantees must indicate the degree of reach when reporting by indicating whether a service is directly or indirectly benefiting youth and young adults ages 15 to 25. So what does direct benefit versus indirect benefit mean? When we say direct benefit, we mean a beneficiary must have received a service to be considered directly benefited. Indirect benefit means a beneficiary can be adjacent to services being delivered and benefited due to proximity. For example, healthier patients or caretakers, more educational options, access to clinics, or a cleaner environment. Some more on the definition. Degree of reach will also be measured by the level of benefit, time spent, and proportion of benefit to the target population. Types of reach include light intervention, for example, delivery of a health education pamphlet, medium intervention, delivery of a product, it could be a vaccination, for example, extensive intervention, an ongoing intervention over time. Human Development Services include all services related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including delivery of products, delivery of training, health services, immunization, provision of services, housing, reach to most vulnerable, advocacy, and family interaction. So it's a very large bucket. Some data notes on this particular indicator. For this indicator, you need to be collecting the name of your program or service delivery, the number of youth reached, the direct or indirect intervention, whether it's a light, medium, or extensive intervention, the type of service or ministry you're providing, and then a description of that service provided. So the next indicator under this portfolio is the number of congregations engaged in human development, focusing on youth and young adults. The number of intercongregational ministries focusing on youth and young adults, and other indicators tailored to ministries. The target is 8 to 10 congregational or confederation members leading an initiative focused on youth or young adults. The definition for this indicator is the total number of congregations engaged in human development focusing on youth and young adults as a part of a network, or the number of intercongregational ministries focusing on youth and young adults. For a human development service to be considered focused on youth and young adults, try to quantify how many of your beneficiaries are in the target age range for your own organization's learning and the future of reporting. This is important. A little bit more in terms of that definition. If programming is focused on training a sister in human development service related activities, implementation at the congregational level must be achieved in order to report on this specific metric. A human development service is any service delivery or advocacy effort related to a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Some data notes on this indicator. So collecting and reporting data for this indicator would include the name of the intercongregational ministry, the number of congregations involved in that ministry, the type of service or ministry per the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the description of the service or ministry, and the percentage of beneficiaries that are in that age range of 15 to 25. This next indicator is the amount in US dollars of public and private resources raised by congregations to support Sisters' human development work, and the target is public and private resources leveraged to support Human Sisters development work. To give you a bit more detail on how to capture and report data for this indicator, the definition is the total amount in US dollars of public and private resources raised by congregations to support Sisters' human development work. Funds raised by sisters within a congregation can be included. In-kind donations can also be included. Please use a reasonable estimate to assess the value of the in-kind donation. Volunteer hours can also be included. Please report the total number of volunteer hours. Please also report the type of funding, the description of funding sources if possible, and the description of services run by sisters supported by funding. So we're about halfway through this recording, so I hope you all have snacks and a few drinks nearby to fortify you. This indicator is the number of congregations with improved service provision skills and capacity to meet the needs of youth and young adults. And the target is 10 congregations with improved provision skills and capacity. The definition for this indicator is the total number of congregations with improved service provision skills and capacity to meet the needs of youth and young adults. There must have been an existing program with quantifiable improvements measured against a baseline. Some examples of improvements include improvements in scope, scale, services, reliability, speed of delivery, quality of service, cost reduction, wait time, lesson waste, redundancy, staffing, and process complexity. So the 5 dimensions of accessibility include approachability, acceptability, accommodation, affordability, and appropriateness. Some data notes. Collecting and reporting for this indicator includes the number of congregations with improvements, the type of improvement, the type of service or ministry, the description of service ministry, the percentage of beneficiaries aged 15 to 25, and finally, how was your baseline established? So I want to note that the next 2 indicators are specifically for Catholic education in Los Angeles grants. This one is the number of students of low-income households and their families reached in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. The target is 5,000 students of low-income households and their families served. The definition for this indicator is the total number of students of low-income households served in Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Low income is defined as 200% of the federal poverty level per Department of Health and Human Services guidelines. Low income can also be defined as a qualification for a subsidized meal program. A little bit more information on this definition. Reported students must be unique students. If you are implementing a school-wide intervention, such as a teacher training, your population is the total population of all low-income students at the school. Please report numbers based on the reporting period and update these to reflect new students to the school each year. So how to capture and report on this specific indicator? Report the name of the school, the number of low-income students, the number of low-income students reached, the description of services provided to students. Do you provide services to families of those low-income students? And the description of those services then provided to families. The final indicator in this portfolio is the number of children in dual language immersion programs. Again, this is for grants in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. The target is 1,000 children benefiting from dual language immersion programs. I've combined the definition and data notes for this indicator into one slide here. The definition is the total number of children in dual language immersion programs. These must be unique students. We're moving on to the 4 knowledge generation and management portfolio indicators. The first one is the number of sisters trained as data trainers. The target is 22 sisters trained as data trainers. The definition for this indicator is the total number of sisters trained as data trainers. Training must be funded by the Catholic Sisters Initiative and designated as a data trainer program. A data trainer is a sister who has received training specifically enabling her to work more effectively with data on a variety of levels, including data management, data sharing, data analysis, data coding, data creation, and research. Here are the notes for capturing and reporting data for this indicator. You need to be reporting the number of sisters completing training, the number of hours to complete training, the description of that training, the number of publications produced by data trainers, and please include citations or a link to those publications. And then if you are tracking your alumni, you need to be recording the total number of alumni for the data training program, how you actually are tracking those alumni activities, and provide a description of alumni activities as related to their training. And if there's any data available from alumni surveys or evaluations, please also note that. The next indicator is for the number of data centers for Catholic Sisters developed in Africa. The target is 2 new data centers. The definition for this indicator is the total number of data centers developed in Africa. Please note that you have to receive a data center grant from the Catholic Sisters Initiative in order to report on this indicator. Please also describe the development of the data center to date. The next indicator is for the number of research papers published or presented. The target is 15 research-based analytical papers published or presented. This is the simplest definition we've had. The total number of research papers published or presented. So some data notes on this. Please be prepared to submit a bibliography of all published works, including books, book chapters, publications in peer-reviewed journals, op-eds or essays in outside publications, and blog post articles on your organization's website. Please also include citations and links to any news articles published or articles including interviews and/or media mentions in relation to your grant-funded work. Citation style is your choice, but again, be sure to include title, journal publication, date, and authors. The final indicator in this portfolio is a longitudinal study tracking entrance and lifelong formation is initiated. The target for this is 1 longitudinal study. Again, I've combined the definition and data notes on one slide. The definition is a longitudinal study is initiated within the time frame of the Catholic Sisters Initiative 2018 to 2022 strategy. Please describe the study design, including the start and end date, the progress on the longitudinal study during the reporting period, any challenges and/or changes experienced, and any surprising findings that you may have. Moving on to the innovation and sustainability portfolio. This indicator is the number of new projects generated that address core problems related to a congregation's viability and/or service excellence. The strategy's target is for grants to be made to 2 scoped projects within areas identified for investment. The definition for this indicator is the total number of new projects generated that address core problems related to a congregation's viability and/or service excellence. Projects must be funded through the innovation portfolio to address issues related to financial management or congregational sustainability. So some data notes for this. Please describe the project you are generating and how it addresses a core problem as it relates to a congregation, along with the progress made during the reporting period. And then, has the solution you are piloting been shared or replicated? If yes, please describe. We are now at the cross-cutting activities portion of this presentation, and you will be happy to know that there are only a few more slides left. The communications indicator is increased press media coverage. The target, broadly, is increased press media coverage. And what I mean by this is broadcast, print, or social media of sisters' work and increased media coverage of sisters as advocacy voices. So the definition for this indicator is that the work of Catholic sisters is covered more widely and by more sources. There are a few data notes for this indicator. You might remember that I mentioned early in the presentation that I would give you more information on what to capture for social media. This is a useful matrix that will allow the initiative to better understand your social media footprint. Please also include citations and links to any news articles published or articles including interviews and/or media mentions in relation to your grant-funded work. We have made it to the final indicator. The indicator for the cross-cutting activities of collaboration and networking is the number of sisters participating in NGO human development data networks and number of sisters taking active leadership roles in NGO networks. The target is an increase in number of sisters participating in NGO human development data networks and number of sisters taking active leadership roles in NGO networks. So the definition is the total number of sisters participating in NGOs focused on human development. An NGO is any non-governmental organization operating in civil society, including faith-based community organizations. Participation includes attending conferences, trainings, and one-off events. Active leadership is defined as presenting, holding board positions, and any activities requiring sustained involvement. A few data notes on capturing and reporting for this indicator. Report the number of sisters participating in the network, the number of sisters active in leadership, and provide a description of those activities. Active leadership in NGO networks, for example, a head of task force or a working group, include presenting at events, being an invited speaker, and sitting on the board. Please be prepared to provide a list of all presentations and/or speaking opportunities made by organizational staff, including name of the staff member, name of presentation, name of conference or the venue, and the number of audience members and date if you have that data available. We have come to the end of this presentation. Before we move on to the live question section, I want to note that you should be communicating with your senior program officer at the Catholic Sisters Initiative, and in concert with her, working out which indicators you should be reporting on. You do not need to be aligned to all the portfolios and indicators, and I think that's really important to note. So thank you for taking your time, and we'll now move on to the live question section of this webinar.